Hi guys, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the Sexton I, the Tier 3 British Premium SPG, or I'm just going to call it RT rather than self-propelled gun, because RT is a lot quicker to say. So Tier 3 RT, it is the only Tier 3 Premium RT in the game, and the big question is it worth it? Well, this tank can be purchased from the gift shop or in-game. It costs 1,250 gold when it's full price, but you can pick it up frequently at half price, 50% off. And to save you a lot of watching, no, it's not worth it. There's the answer, it's not worth it. But it's not worth it for reasons you would not think. As a tank goes, and as an SPG or RT goes, actually this thing isn't bad. I have had quite a bit of fun that I was not expecting playing this tank, but it's definitely not worth it. But the reasons it's not worth it, unlike any other tank or tank review I've done before, are not what you expect. So let's talk about the history of the tank. Well, the tank was developed in 1942. It was went into mass production in 1943. The Sexton I was built on the chassis of the Ram II. And as the Ram II is a Canadian tank, yes, this makes this a Canadian tank. It was built for the Commonwealth Forces. So the Sexton I was built on the chassis of a Ram II. So it was built as a replacement for the M7 Priest, which was being used both by the US and the British forces in the North African campaigns. The prototype was built on the Ram II and became known as the Sexton I, but when the tank went into mass production, it was actually built on the chassis of the M4 Sherman, and that particular tank became the Sexton II, both of which are at Tier 3 in the British RT lines. The tank did see a lot of combat, both in North Africa and in Europe. Now, I usually like to compare premium tanks to premium tanks, but there are very few premium RT in the game. On top of that, there are only two, one at Tier 3 with the Sexton, and one at Tier 5 with the LEFH 18B2. So I can't really compare it against another premium tank. So really, the best way of comparing this tank would probably be to compare it to its counterpart on the British lines, which is the actual Sexton II, a later version of this tank. And as I was saying, the Sexton II is built on the chassis of a Sherman, while the Sexton I was built on the chassis of a Ram. So they do look slightly different. However, they do use the same gun. So the best way to compare the Sexton, in my opinion, is to put it up against the Sexton II and the M7 Priest, which the Sexton was built to replace, which just happens to be at Tier 3 on the American lines. And as you can see, all of these tanks look very, very similar, because they were built on very similar chassis, the Ram II, the M4 Sherman, and the M3 Lee. They were all built and designed around the same time, so these three are far more closely related than you would think. So we're going to take a look at the hit points, and we see that the Tier 3 RTs across the board have roughly 140 hit points, which no advantage or disadvantage for any of those tanks. The weight limit, or the load limit for all three tanks is very, very similar. Again, nothing much to talk about here. And again, the engine power is very, very similar between all three tanks. The Sexton I, the prototype, has a little bit less engine power, but it's still fairly close to the Sexton II and the Priest. The top speed is the same as the Sexton II, just a slightly bit faster than the M7 Priest. Now you're starting to see why I'm comparing these three tanks together, because they are so similar. We come down to the traverse speed, and you'll see that the Sexton I, because it's built on a Ram II chassis, actually has far better traverse speed. So this tank can turn much better than the Sexton II or the Priest. But again, because we're in RT, that's not really an issue. When we look at the hull armor, you'll see that the hull armor is pretty similar to the Sexton II with 50 millimeters on front, but the Sexton II does get a little bit more side armor than the Sexton I does, mainly because it is built on a different chassis. The M7 Priest is also very, very similar to, side armor wise, to the Sexton and to the Sexton I, but it does have 101 millimeters of frontal armor, which can confuse newer players who decide to shoot it in the hull. Having said that, the rear armor on both Sextons is better than the M7 Priest, but not by much. Again, it's 38 in the back, which can confuse smaller Tier 3 scouts firing machine guns when they fail to penetrate you, but not that big an issue. The M7 Priest only has 12 millimeters of rear armor. Gun traverse is 16 across the board, but the Sextons have amazing gun arc. The Sextons can turn their guns without having to move the hull of the tank a huge distance. They can cover almost pretty much the whole map, and that means you don't have to go through the reload cycle again, and that makes this tank a little bit more fun to play. Its view range is 330 across the board, and the Sexton I, the prototype, actually has better signal range than the Sexton II, but this is the stock version of the Sexton II, and upgrading the radio will increase that signal range. But as you can see, the Sexton I, even though it's a premium tank, it adds up pretty favorably to the other Tier 3 arty. There's not that much difference until you come down to the gun. So here we are, the three final guns for the three tanks we are currently comparing, and you'll see that the Sextons use an 87mm or a 25-pounder, whereas the M7 Priest they were built to replace uses the 105. The rate of fire is much better on the Sextons. Now the Sexton, one of the strengths of the Sexton is its rate of fire. It can fire off 5 shots a minute compared to 3 rounds a minute for the howitzer. So the M7 fires off a shot roughly every 20 seconds, whereas the Sextons manage to get a shot off just over every 11 seconds. So the rate of fire on the Sextons is pretty good. That's not a bad thing, especially in arty. We come down to the average penetration, and this is one of the downsides. You've only got 44 millimeters of penetration on the Sextons, and you've got a 53 millimeters of penetration on the M7 Priest, which means, like most low-tier arty, you've got to pick and choose your targets. Now again, I cannot complain about the Sexton only having 44 millimeters of penetration, because a lot of the low-tier arty have exactly the same problem. If you pick and choose your targets, you can do a lot of damage, and that's what you have to do in all low-tier arty. You can't play low-tier arty and expect to do damage to KV-1s. It just will not happen. However, even though the M7 Priest has a little bit more penetration and it has more alpha damage, it has quite a lot more alpha damage, and that is one of the issues. So even if you can't pen the tanks you're shooting with the 105 howitzer, you will be doing a lot more damage to them than you can with the 25-pounder. At 280 damage, quite frequently, you will find yourself doing 0 damage to higher tier heavily armored targets. And I mean 0. With a direct hit, you will do 0 damage. This has 7.6 meters splash range, while the howitzer has 8.2 meters splash range. So the splash range isn't bad, but it's not good. And again, you will find yourself landing shells directly beside tanks, and even if you can get them in that dispersion circle, you will end up doing very little damage, or probably no damage to them at all. This gun seems to only do damage if it's direct hit. The aiming time is identical across the board, so 5.5 second aiming time. Again, you can increase this with a better crew and equipment, but it's not great. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's identical on the premium tank as it is to the two non-premiums. The premium ammo on the Sexton I doesn't save it either. The premium ammo is armor piercing, just like the standard armor piercing rounds. The only difference is you get about 20 millimeters more penetration. So while you need to hit the target directly with the armor piercing, you don't get that much of a millimeter boost with your premium ammo over the standard AP, and the damage goes down. It drops down to 180. So tanks you think you might be able to one-shot kill with HE, you are no longer able to one-shot kill if you do manage a direct hit on them with the AP ammo. So let's see this gun in action, and we are here on Ensk, and the first thing you'll notice is I can cover the entire map, and this is one of the big strengths of the Sexton. You have very good range, especially compared to Russian arty, and you don't have to actually relocate very much. It's a good matchup for this tank. It's an all tier 3 game, so one of two things happens. You get into an all tier 3 game where you can pen and damage most of the enemy tanks, or you get into a tier 5 game and you'll find that you're going to have a lot of difficulty penning a lot of KV1s and T1 heavies and even DW2s, or even tier 4 DW2s. Sorry, I've been recording for quite a while and my mind is starting to go. But pretty much any tanks with armor you have problems with. But as you can see, the aim time isn't bad, and if you can fire at stationary targets that you can pen, you can damage them. So went for a shot, and again, shot went fairly close to where I aimed it, but not perfectly. I'm going to play this on ×2 because I've got a lot of replay footage for you today. So aiming at the Su-26, and again, by the time I aim, the enemy tank is dead. Missed that shot in the T-18, and even though the shot landed straight beside him, I don't do any splash damage. But managed to get a killing shot in the PZ-3A. I know that T-18 is up here somewhere. Aiming at the Chiha, and there we go. Another one-hit kill. There's that T-18 I want. So T-18, 50mm of frontal armor. And I somehow missed that shot, don't know where it went. Hit him that time and only managed to do 63 damage, so 44mm of pen, just not good enough on this tank. But as you can see, this is a 15-minute game and we are just over 4 minutes into the game and the game is over. And there we go. So kill number 4. One enemy tank left, hiding up in the corner. T-82, it's another tank I can one-hit kill. Oop, there he is. And I've got a shot, I've got a shot. And unfortunately, 94 damage, and game is over. So that entire game took 4.5 minutes, and that is one of the issues when you're playing low-tier arty. If you've got a good team, the game is over before you can do any major damage. If you're on a bad team, the game is over and you are dead before you can do any damage. But the gun is pretty good if you can pick and choose your targets. So let's take it to a completely different scenario. This time we've managed to get ourselves into a tier 5 game. A lot of heavily armored tanks on the enemy team. There's a Churchill, KV-1, T1 heavy. Even the B1 on the enemy team has armor, so I'm going to have problems penning him. But again, it's a big map compared to Ensk, and you can see that we can cover pretty much the entire map apart from K1. So from our spawn position, we have the gun range to actually damage tanks across the entire map, and that's another good thing for the tank. So we're just going to play it again on maybe ×4 this time. Because it's a big map, it's going to be a slightly slower game than the Ensk game. But again, I'm moving into position, and now I'm in a position where I can hit pretty much the entire enemy map. And Kinu is spotted. I'm trying to get shots on him, but I can't. T-49 is behind a rock, desperately trying to get shots, and I decide that I can't get angle shots into the cap from my current position, so I need to relocate. Okay, so now I've had to relocate again, and I'm desperately looking for shots. There's a Chiha. Now, unfortunately, my gun sights are slightly off, but 109 damage on a Chiha. Don't even manage to pen a Chiha. Completely miss the T49. It's typical arty game. T28 I can hit, but unfortunately, again, the shot goes low. And the enemy team are advancing into the cap aggressively. Chiha moves just as I fire. So again, something wrong with the replay. The aiming reticule is slightly off. And again, that tank moved before I could fire. So KV-1. Let's go for a shot in the KV-1. There we go. We hit a KV-1 and did 0 damage to the KV-1. Absolutely no damage to an armored target. Side of a Chiha, killing shot, and again the shot goes low. So you've got all the frustrations of other RT. I'm trying to go for splash damage on that particular tank. But you've got all the frustrations of RT. And it's even worse when you're in low tier RT. So again, look, a shot on a Churchill 1, got a direct hit, and 0 damage. A splash shot that landed directly beside the Churchill 1, it didn't even hit him. Again, shot that landed beside the Churchill 1 didn't even kill him. Now, this was a big game, this is a big map, and we are only 15-minute game, and we are basically 5.5 minutes into it, and the game is over. So again, took a rush shot on the mortar before being fully aimed because I wanted to do a little bit of damage, and unfortunately he dies before we can reload. So that's pretty much it. We end up capping and never find the last remaining enemy tank. So let's take a look at the crew. Well, we have a huge crew. We have a very, very big crew here. And that would make it a really, really good crew trainer, right? No, wrong, unfortunately. We're going to bring up the crews, and I'll just do this while I'm recording, and we'll take a look at the Sexton II. And you can see that the crew layouts for the Sexton and the Sexton II are very, very similar. Okay, this is good news. It's a good crew trainer for the Sexton II. But the Sexton II is also a tier 3 tank, so you're not really going to be training a crew for the Sexton. We'll take a look at the Birch gun, and things start to look a little bit differently. So even though we've got the same number of crew members, all of a sudden we've got an extra gunner on the Birch gun. And we still have the 2 loaders, but we don't have a radio operator. In fact, very few of the British RT use radio operators. So you're going to be training up a radio operator on the Sexton for next to no reason. So that is a waste of a slot. Also, the Birch gun has 2 gunners. So you're going to have to get a new gunner when you move on to tier 4. But we're not done. No, not done yet. Let's take a look at the tier 5. Again, you can see that the tier 5 has the commander, the gunner, the driver, and the loader. So yes, you can train a crew for the Bishop in the Sexton, but you're going to have crew members left over. And we come to the same issue with the FV304. Again, you can train crew members, and again, you're going to be bringing your loader back out of retirement from the Bishop, moving him on to the FV304. But again, you're left with crew members left over. And when we get to the higher tiers, thankfully, the Crusader is the same as the FV304. But when we do get to the higher tiers, let's get rid of these. We're going to run into issues again. So we've brought a loader back in out of the wilderness, where 2 loaders play on some British tanks, but not, or some British RT, but not all British RT. But then we've got our gunner again, so we need a second gunner from somewhere on the FV207. We'll take a look at the FV208, and again, that gunner goes missing yet again on the tier 9 RT. And we'll take a look at the tier 10. And now the gunner has reappeared in the tier 10, but you can see it's not a fantastic crew trainer. Yes, you get your commander, your one gunner, a driver, and both loaders trained by playing them in the Sexton, but you're going to be dropping crew members in and out all the way up the British Arty line. The British Arty, and it's not the Sexton's fault. I really don't want to blame the Sexton for this. It's not a good crew trainer, not because of the tank itself, but simply because all the tanks that come after it have different crew configurations every single tier. It's also not a good crew trainer for a couple of other reasons. One, you're going to be playing at tier 3, and at tier 3, for reasons I will explain during the replay section, there aren't that many hit points and isn't that much XP floating around the battlefield. I mean, if you're shooting tier 3 tanks, you're not going to be earning a lot of experience or doing a lot of damage. They directly affect the amount of experience you earn in a game, and therefore the amount of training you can give your crew members. Another reason the Sexton doesn't make a very good crew trainer is a big one, and it's the fact that the Sexton, unlike most premium tanks, not all of them, but most premium tanks, receive a small crew XP modifier. The Sexton doesn't. So you don't earn any extra XP other than the XP you earn in-game while on this tank. Which begs the question, if you're not earning any XP coefficient for the crew on this tank, why even play it? I mean, you might as well just play the Sexton 2, the standard Sexton on the British TD or British Arty line, because it's got the same crew and it'll earn you exactly the same XP as the Sexton 1. There's absolutely no reason for the Sexton 1. The only thing the Sexton 1 has over the Sexton 2 in any way is the fact it earns slightly more credits. That's it. There is absolutely no other reason to have a Sexton 1 over a Sexton 2 if you were serious about using a low tier Arty crew trainer. But that's not a good idea. Let's talk about equipment. Equipment's fairly simple for Arty. Basically, for Arty, you're going to have to get that loading time down, so you're going to need a medium caliber Arty shell rammer. You're also going to need an enhanced gun laying drive to increase your aim time, or to decrease your aim time. You've got one piece of equipment left over, and really, Camo Net is probably the only decent choice. I mean, toolbox on an Arty, nah, you're not going to really use it. Coated optics, again, completely useless. Binocs, why are you going to be spotting your own targets? Again, complete waste of money. Spall liner, potentially if you're getting counter-artied, but it's a tier 3, you're not going to be getting counter-artied. Most Arty won't even be able to reach you. Improved suspension, again, complete waste of money. Ammo rack, complete waste of money. I mean, the only choice you have here is the Camo Net. You want to stay hidden as long as possible, and really, this makes it very, very simple. I cannot honestly see any other piece of equipment other than these three being used on a Sexton. And the other downside to this equipment I haven't mentioned before is this is a tier 3 Arty. A medium caliber artillery shell rammer is bloody expensive, and so is an enhanced gun laying drive. So in order to equip my Sexton, it cost me 500,000 credits for the gun laying drive. It cost me 300,000 credits for the medium caliber artillery shell rammer. That's a hell of a lot of money credits if you're going to be outfitting a Sexton 1. It's just not worth it, guys. Now, I wanted to show you some of the problems you have when you're playing this particular tank, and it's scary, but I have so many replays. Basically, what happens when I'm going through a replay and I'm preparing for these videos is I'll watch the replay and I'll figure out whether that was a good example for the gun, a good example for the tank, a good example for the armor, whether that would be a good overview game, or whether that would be a good replay to show the problems that a tank can have. And I put them into subfolders. The subfolder for the Sexton has 14 games. So 14 replays I decided to choose, and this is not games that I decide to delete because they're not very good or because they don't show anything that I haven't shown before, but I have 14 replays in my problems folder for the Sexton. And in each of those replays, there is a different problem with the tank or different problem with the situation the tank can find itself in highlighted. I don't have time to bring you 14 replays, and you probably would fall asleep and click to another video by the time you went through 14 replays. But I'm just going to try and show you basically the problems you're going to run into. Again, I apologize. I'm not going to show you 14 replays, but I am going to show you some of the problems with the tank. Okay, so I've moved into position on the 2 line, and I'm going to start shooting. So I'm going to play this at ×2. Hago sitting stationary. Lots of enemy tanks, lots of targets, aiming at the Hago. Finally get aim, shoot, and the shot goes a little bit low, only do 14 splash damage. In the meantime, all 3 enemy tanks there have died before I can shoot them, so let's hit the LTP. LTP is dead before I can fire. Okay, only the M2 light spotted. He's constantly moving. Trying to get shots on him. Oh, T26. And he's dead before I can fire. Okay, M2 light is back. Let's see if we can get a shot on the move. Nope, just missed him. Okay, we'll go through our reload again. Oh, he's sitting stationary, and he's dead before we can fire. And there's the Jagdpanzer, or Panzerjäger. He's dead before we can fire. Okay, so there's a Keeney and a T60. Oh, nope, T60 is dead already. Okay, Stationary Cruiser 2. Stationary Cruiser 2. We've done a whole 14 damage. No, Cruiser 2 is dead before we can fire. SU-26. SU-26, don't kill him, don't kill him, don't kill him. Hooray! Our first kill. Okay, 1 enemy tank left. 1 enemy tank left. Let's kill the M2 medium. Let's kill the M2 medium. No, he's dead before we can fire. So there we go. This is a standard, pretty much a standard Sexton game when your team is very, very good. Enemy tanks don't have the hit points and they all die before you can actually fire. So in that game I did a whole 124 damage. I only managed to hit 1 enemy tank, even though I was firing pretty much constantly through that entire game. Every single enemy tank I was aiming for died, with the exception of the Su-26. They all died before I could actually shoot them. And welcome to Sexton 1 problem number 1. So the Sexton 1 is frustrating when you get onto a good team. Everything dies before you can hit it. And here's an example, and I've got so many examples of either being on a good team and being frustrated, or being on a bad team and being frustrated. Here's one of being on a bad team. We are here in a tier 4 game. We are on Malinovka, and I can pretty much cover the entire map with the gun distance. So it has potential of being a good game. But because it's a low tier game, you've got a lot of incompetence on your team and a lot of inexperience, and even the more experienced players are being incompetent in this particular game. So I move into position. We've got very, very few tanks moving up the 9-0 lines, and I'm just trying to find targets. So unfortunately, the 2 tanks that went up the 9-0 lines are out of my radio range, but we're doing okay. We're actually winning. But my entire team are camping in spawn, and we got 1 M3 Lee who's moved across, but I decide that this flank is no longer safe, so I move a little bit further into safety. And the usual problem, tanks moving before I can fire. Okay, so now we've lost all our tanks that moved up the 9-0 lines. Martyr 2 kills a T-46, a friendly T-46 who was deciding to TK. So we've got TKers, we've got complete incompetence on our team. Our team are shooting each other. Our entire team are still camping in spawn. They're completely ignoring what's happening on the 9-0 line. The M3 Lee is under fire. He's falling back. And yeah, even though we've completely lost one flank, the idiots on our team decide that they're going to advance up the other flank. So I've done pretty much no damage in this game so far, and I'm getting fairly frustrated We know that there are tanks coming down the 9-0 line. They're going to start flanking us any moment. A couple of our tanks do move over to try and deal with them, but they die fairly quickly because they're outnumbered. Now our entire team decide to shift focus over to the other flank, but it's too late. The other team are in our spawn. And I'm still desperately trying to do damage here. I've had to constantly relocate. I'm frustrated. I've got no targets. I'm missing everything. So I decide to start blind firing bushes where enemy tanks are likely to be hiding. And there we go. Managed to get one. So PZ-38NA set up for a shot on the corner and unfortunately miss him. But our entire team has collapsed. We've gone from a really, really strong position into a position where we're about to lose this game. So PZ-38NA comes around and I get killed by a DW2 that's camping in spawn. So yeah, there we go. Complete incompetence on behalf of part of our team. And that's what you run into in the Sexton again and again and again and again. So you've got to deal with the frustration of playing the Sexton when you get into a game where your team are just too good and everything dies before you hit it. Then you've got to deal with the frustration of playing the Sexton where your team are inexperienced or incompetent. And then, of course, you've got to deal with the frustration of playing the Sexton when it plays like a normal arty and not one of your bloody shots will actually hit the target. The RNG gods decide that no, we are going to screw with you today, and the arty is going to perform like most arty do. Now the replay is a little bit broken, as you can see. The final part of my gun line is red, but don't let that bother you because I'm not able to hit the side of a barn door anyway. PZ-1C direct shot, but no, shot falls incredibly low. Lots of tier 5 tanks on the enemy team. There we go. Shot on the KV-1. No, miss him. Direct shot on the T1 heavy. No, miss him as well. Can't get a shot at the Sexton. Let's go back to the KV-1. Direct shot. Nope. Shot decides to do nothing but fall short. Another shot. That one actually did go in, but no damage recorded. Okay, side of a T1 heavy. And again, shot goes low. No damage. Another shot on the side of a T1 heavy. Aiming carefully. And shot goes low. Okay, we've got a Sexton. Enemy Sexton. Is he still there? Nope, he moved. Okay, so again, complete and utter failure. These tanks are moving. Okay, we've got a shot on a PZ-4. Just about. Nope, shot goes low. Okay, we've got an FCM pack, and he's sitting in the open. Perfect shot. Should be a one-hit kill. And the shot goes low and only does 60 splash damage. So I got to go through this reload time again. Alright, now, hooray! We've done some damage and we've killed him. So meanwhile, the enemy tanks are moving into spawn. PZ-4 sitting in the open. And yeah, I hadn't realized I'd been spotted. So I don't have 6th sense on this crew yet. But this tank is just so frustrating. Cannot hit the side of a barn door sometimes. Sometimes every shot will hit, but you're doing no damage. Or other times, just every shot you fire will miss the enemy tanks. So how about this game on Ensk? I can cover the entire map. It's a tier 3 game, so should be able to one-hit kill a lot of the enemy tanks. I'm going to run away from the weaker flank. Okay, I've set up position. I'm going to play this one on ×2. So, trying to get into position. Okay, I've got a shot in the Valentine 2. Just need someone to spot him, but no joy. Trying to get shots on enemy RT. Got a hint of a shot, maybe. Nope, okay, Valentine 2's in the open. And the shot goes low. Okay, medium 3. There we go. Nice kill. Martyr 2 sitting steady, sitting still. And there we go. So the gun will behave itself. The gun can behave itself sometimes. So we're having a good game. We're having a pretty good game. Alright, 2 tanks here. Can't get shots on either of them. They're both in cover, unfortunately. And, yep, okay. Just need this T-46 to move. But no, he's no... Hang on. 1 enemy tank left. What the hell? We aren't even 3 minutes into this game, and we've got 1 enemy tank left on the enemy team, and our team cap out before actually managing to find him. So there we go. Gun was behaving itself. I was having a good game, managed to get 2 kills, and the game was over basically in 3 minutes exactly. Welcome to Sexton I gameplay. So if you haven't figured it out yet, I'll spell it out for you. This tank is extremely frustrating to play. We are here on Runeberg, and I've just got so many examples of how the Sexton sucks. I'm just going to end it here. I'm not going to bother recording anymore. This is the last one. I do have about another 9 example videos of ways the Sexton is frustrating, but I just couldn't be bothered, and the video is going to be too long anyway. So we're just going to finish up here. We are here on Ensk.
Let's go.
And most of the other gameplay videos are just repeating what I've shown you already. Frustration trying to pen enemy tanks, etc, etc. So again, we are here on Runeberg, and for some reason most of our team decide to sit AFK in spawn or travel up the 6-7 lines. Very few tanks actually come to spawn. Again, because they're low tiers, and because basically they don't know how to play, or they aren't low tiers, they are tier 5, 4s. They do have some experience, 4,000 games, 7,000 games, 28,000 games. They just don't know how to play World of Tanks. But we are here, and again, there is a PZ1C who has managed to flank us, even though we've got tanks in the middle, and most of our tanks went to camp 6 and 7 lines. Those tanks on the 6 and 7 lines completely ignore the fact we're being flanked by a PZ1C. I see the danger. He's already taken out one of our RT. He's now working on an AMX-38 and gives up because he can't pen him. There's an M8A1 sitting in the open here, but of course he moves while my shot's in the air. And while all of that is happening, because we sent very, very few tanks into town, I ended up getting flanked and dying 3.5 minutes into the game. So this is pretty much what you're going to encounter in the Sexton again and again and again. It's not the tank's fault, it's the fact you're playing tier 3 RT with players who either aren't very good or players who aren't very experienced. And you're going to lose and lose and lose and get frustrated and basically not want to play this tank. So to sum up, guys, the tank is not bad. As far as RT goes, like most low tier RT, you can pick and choose your targets, you can do damage. You can't do damage against heavily armored tanks, but you can pin them in place. You've got great gun traverse, you've got great gun distance, you've got a fantastic gun arc. I mean, you've got a great rate of fire. The tank is not bad. It is reasonably well armored for an RT. You can bounce a lot of shots from lower tier scouts. You can shotgun people in the face. The tank is maneuverable enough to actually move around and use it as a TD towards the end of games. You don't want to do it very often, but it is possible to do. The problem with this tank is, as far as crew training goes, it's a complete and utter waste of time. But not because of the tank itself. It has a decent crew layout, but all the British SPGs or RT that come after the Sexton have very differing crew layouts. On top of that, you don't get a crew XP coefficient, so you're not going to be earning any more XP in the Sexton 1 as you are in the Sexton 2. So playing the Sexton 1 is just like playing any other tier 3 RT. The only benefit the Sexton 1 gets over any other standard tier 3 RT is the fact it earns slightly more credits. But again, it's a tier 3, so you're not going to be earning that many credits to begin with. And at 1,250 gold, it is definitely not worth it. But as I say, the tank is not bad in itself. There are other factors you've got to continue, and you will have seen that during the replays. you're going to be playing tier 3 games. You're going to be playing with teammates that don't have a bloody clue what they're doing. That means that you will be left exposed. That means that your team will let enemy scouts rush straight through their lines to come and kill you. You will find that games are ending in 2 or 3 minutes without you being able to do any damage whatsoever. You will have all the usual arty problems. You're going to have some games where your gun will not miss, and you're going to have some games where you cannot hit the side of a barn door. But on top of that, because it's a low tier arty, you're going to have the issues where, yes, you might get into a game where most of the tanks on the enemy team are tier 3, and you can pen and you can do full damage and you could have potentially a huge game, but they're tier 3s. A, they don't know what they're doing, so they're charging around the map like headless chickens. 2, they're small targets and they're fast moving. Most of the tier 3s are going to be light tanks. So yes, you can one-hit kill them, but the chances of them sitting still long enough for you to be able to hit them and kill them are very, very small. 3, because it's a low tier arty, that means you've got all the standard arty problems of higher tier arty, in that you spend ages lining up a shot on a stationary target, and by the time you aim and fire, the enemy tank moves and you miss your shot. You have that problem tenfold in tier 3 games. Basically, the second issue, or another issue in a tier 3 game, is you can have exactly the same problem. You can find a stationary low tier tank thinking he's hidden in a bush. You could be aiming, lining up your target, but because it's a low tier game, the enemy tanks have so little hit points to begin with in the first place. By the time you've gone through that 6 or 7 second aiming time, the enemy tank is dead. And game after game after game in the Sexton, I am aiming at tanks that I can one-hit kill. I have selected my target, I can pen them, I can one-hit kill them, but the enemy tank is dead before I can even fire. Or, even if I do manage to fire, because of the shell travel time, the enemy is dead while my shell is in the air and I end up hitting a wreck. The incompetence or inexperience of your teammates cause you far more frustrations in this tank than the tank does itself. And for once, I'm going to say that the Sexton II is not worth the gold. Definitely not worth the gold. I can think of 15 other things I would rather spend gold on in this game than a Sexton. That's a slight plug for my gold review. But it's just not worth it. And it's not the tank, guys. It's the tier it's at. It's the penetration, the low penetration of the gun. But I can't complain about the low penetration because other arty have exactly the same problem. It's not the tank. It's your teammates. It's the fact you're playing low tier. And I cannot recommend getting this tank for anyone other than if it was a joke. If you really want to annoy someone, get them a Sexton I. If you want to insult someone, get them a Sexton I. If the person is your worst possible enemy, buy them a Sexton I. If you've just been in a random game and some idiot or asshat has just shoved you off a cliff or TK'd you, don't curse them. Go to the gift shop, find their name in the player list and send them a Sexton I. Thank them for TKing you for absolutely no reason by giving them a Sexton I. So yeah guys, not worth it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.